Hello again, Lee and Alfred Ezman of Southeastern 14 here to talk a little SEC baseball, give our power rankings and thoughts as we enter, I believe, week 6 of the SEC baseball season. St. Patrick's Day is in the rearview mirror. The first conference weekend is also. We got a lot to talk about. You always kind of want to wait and see what happens when we get that first batch of conference on conference action. And boy, there were some surprises, which makes figuring out this week very confusing. Before we get into that, a reminder, BetOnline continues to be your number one source for all your basketball wagering needs, including pro and college hoops throughout the year with up-to-the-minute odds, stats, and trends. You can follow your favorite team's path to the playoffs with live in-game betting, contests, and all the best player props. Experience the world's best wagering platform anytime from your desktop or your mobile devices. Head to BetOnline today. Become part of the team. Remember to use promo code BELIEVE, that is BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, Alfred. Full disclosure, I was at Bridgestone Arena for all but Sunday of the SEC basketball tournament. If you haven't watched our coverage there, we had a live stream on the bracket reveal with almost 3,000 people. So we were covering hoops wall to wall there. Now, that said, keep an eye on baseball. When I came home from that, I had 2 TVs on in my house watching some ball, trying to watch it on my laptop a little bit here and there from Bridgestone Arena. You were watching your own set of stuff in terms of SEC baseball games. We have stat sheets to read. We have gut feelings built in. So with that, all this to say, we are going to be more locked in on baseball going forward. That doesn't mean we don't have some observations. But if we did miss something, just going to put that out there. We got a little divided focus this time of the year. We do the best we can. And, boy, we had a hard time sorting through these this week. I think the only surprise that I had no idea what you were going to pick. You had no idea what I was going to pick. I didn't have any idea what I was going to pick on some of these till I sat down and did it.
Yeah,
but amazingly, we didn't have any ties this week.
Mm-hmm.
That shocked me.
I was about to say.
Because we had plenty of confusion. And let's start from the bottom. Our number 14 team remains Missouri. I'm just going to give you some stats here. I do a ranking, just kind of a computer ranking to help me out with some stuff. I like Warren Nolan's ELO, which is kind of a ELO chess system where winner takes all in certain games. They explain it. You can look that up. I do KPI, which is results-based. It's almost like an RPI. And I do Kenneth Massey, which is, I think, scoring margin as part of it. I average those together, kind of use that as a guide. Missouri averaged out as the number 146 team in the country. The next worst team in the SEC was 34. And by the way, there was a big pack of teams in that range, too. We'll get to that in a minute. So pretty big gap between Missouri and the rest of the league. And look, it was our one team against our 14 team matched up this weekend in terms of last week's rankings. Missouri, our 14, Arkansas, our 1. And, oh, by the way, it was played in Fayetteville. So this was set up to kind of be a route to begin with, and that's what happened. Missouri got 8 hits the whole weekend, scored 1 run, did walk 10 times. So there's that. But just dominated by Arkansas's pitching. Yeah, unfortunately for Missouri, this is a rebuilding year for Carrick Jackson, and boy, that's not where you want to start. It's in Fayetteville with that pitching staff. I don't know what else to say about the Tigers. I think we'll probably see some better baseball as the season goes on, but that's a rough way to start. And speaking of rough weekends, my goodness, I did not expect Kentucky to do what it did to Georgia. Now, there's a Kentucky side of this in a minute we'll get into. But that was a ballpark and an environment that sort of played into everything that Georgia's not done. Georgia is a long ball team. It will give some up. Kentucky is a bunt, run, steal kind of game. When it is cold in Lexington, which it typically is this time of the year, that's going to depress power numbers. So I don't know that Georgia is 13. I think Georgia could be a little better than that, but when you get smoked in Kentucky to the tune of, let me see what this was, because boy, it was lopsided. What was it? 11 to 37. Yeah, 37-11 composite score. We both had Georgia at 13, kind of made it a little bit easier, given that. So,
yeah, a
not
lot of
much
these.
else to say. Yeah.
Now, a lot of these power rankings we had, you guys will see, is it's just weird because we had this was a very weird result. I did not expect Georgia to go into Kentucky and get swept like they did. So there'll be another one coming up too. You'll see. It was just kind of weird with how we rank them. It's the rankings right now. I feel like we're still in the stage where not necessarily the representation of what the team is. Like you said, I think Georgia's higher than 13th in the SEC. I'll give them that at least, but it's just hard, with how these other teams played ahead of them to put them ahead of the teams at 12 and 11.
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of had to at this point. And Georgia dominated the first month out of the gate, but the competition was also suspect. Kentucky, I guess, relatively held Charlie Condon down this weekend, which also helps. So, yeah, kind of with the way some of these other teams played, I don't think we had much of a choice. So, anyway, moving on. I think we probably got it wrong on Ole Miss. But some teams above them drew some very disparate votes. And so that's kind of where it settled. Andrew Fisher had a tremendous weekend for the Rebels, who got a big series win this weekend over a South Carolina team that just can't seem to catch a break right now. This is where we get into that pack. This is what we're looking at. I referenced those computer rankings earlier. There are 5 teams in a pack that we're starting right now that rate between 29 and 34 nationally in those computer rankings. So what the computers are saying is we got 5 teams that are fairly identical. And by the way, Georgia's in that mix too. But with the bludgeoning it just took, I think Georgia had to take a spot down, which it did. So that's kind of where we are. If you're looking at this and going, man, I would have picked these teams differently than you guys did. Yeah, I could see scenarios for all these, but that's where we rank the Rebels for this week. But I think here's what's encouraging. After Ole Miss had 2 really bad weeks to start the season, or certainly not meeting expectations, the Rebels have played much better ball.
Agreed. I think, especially this is a South Carolina team. Again, they're in a weird spot. We'll get into them later in a sec, but they can at times really shut the lights out and pitch really well with guys like Eli Jones and whatnot. They get on base a lot too, so Ole Miss kind of had to combat with that. But a guy, I saw for Ole Miss I was impressed with was Jackson Ross, 5 RBIs in that Saturday win. I think that in that game, I can't remember what inning. It was a middle inning. Ole Miss had 8 runs, and they kind of just ran away with that game, and that set the tone for the first 2 wins they had. And then, Sunday, South Carolina got the better of them. I'll get into that in a sec. But Grayson Saunier didn't have the best start by any means. But I think if you're Ole Miss, if you can get a series win to start SEC play like they did, that's always very encouraging going forward. So we'll be on the lookout for them. Both the Mississippi schools seemingly kind of turning the page a little bit and starting to pick up the pace.
Yeah, absolutely. And Andrew Fisher, I think a Duke transfer who had 3 home runs this weekend. Ole Miss has been hitting the portal for the lineup the last couple of years, and the rotation too, frankly. And that's a place where it appears that the Rebels have hit with that one so far. I forgot to put Ole Miss on the screen. There you go. Sorry, Rebels. Number 11, Auburn. And I'll be honest, I saw the Auburn Vandy series in Nashville. Saw one of the games in person, watched a couple more on TV. And I did not know what to expect between those 2 teams. Statistically, they were a pretty even match coming in. Auburn had a little bit more power. Auburn walked a lot, which has been an issue for Vanderbilt at times, is walking guys. Auburn got boat raced from the jump in this one. Did get some early runs and did lead Sunday. I was disappointed in Auburn's defense. I thought a lot of pass balls and wild pitches and stuff like that. The bullpen let them down. The starting pitching at times was okay. Actually was okay out of the gate most of those games, but it just didn't hold. Butch Thompson's teams always get better every year, but I didn't think Auburn really brought it this weekend. I'll tell you, who did have a good weekend, Cooper McMurray. their left-handed power first baseman, but their defense on the whole, just the left side of the infield was pretty good, and the outfield was fair, but they had some issues at catcher and at first, and so anyway, that's all I've got to say about Butch Thompson and Auburn for this weekend. I think better things ahead, but with my own eyes this weekend, didn't like the way they played. Now, here's one. You kept tabs on this series, Mississippi State and LSU. I don't think most of us had Mississippi State taking a series from LSU. State not only took the series, it was within a run of sweeping the series. And against the defending national champs, State in a little bit of a do-or-die spot this year for Coach Chris Lemonis, needs to have a big year. The bats have been a little disappointing, but they came alive this weekend in Starkville. I thought State was maybe a little better than people were giving them credit for, but I didn't really see a series win coming against LSU. Now, that said, I think State maybe took the series last year from LSU, or at least took a Sunday game. So maybe there's something in the matchup there where Mississippi State just matches up well with LSU. I'd have to dive into that a little bit more. But you kept tabs on this one this weekend. What did you see?
Yeah, I tell you, I definitely did not think Mississippi State would take this series. And the one loss they had, I mean, they were mounting a comeback and just came up short right at the end by a run. And LSU was able to get out of a jam with that one. But the one big thing I've seen out of Mississippi State, I think Urangelo is slowly becoming one of, if not the best Sunday pitcher in the SEC. It just seems like, especially this year, and he's been the guy on Sunday for them. He's undefeated 5-0 with 41 strikeouts. It just seems like Mississippi State's going to get the win on Sunday at this point. I mean, he hasn't lost yet. TBD, as we get further and further into SEC play, when he has some big lineups to face. But he looked good in that game as well. The bats did come alive. They had 41 hits all weekend. Connor Usack had a 3 RBI game in the first game, which was a win. And then in game 3 on Sunday, Dakota Jordan had 3 runs. Those two, again, I just think are going to continue to be the faces of that lineup going forward and whatnot. But overall, they were just able to keep LSU. They were able to keep LSU at bay. The LSU win, Jared Jones had a big game, 2 for 4, 2 RBIs. Mac Bingham was very active, getting on the base paths for the Tigers. But again, I don't think that translated to the team as a whole this weekend, getting active on the base paths. So it's a good win for Mississippi State. Again, much like Ole Miss, they turned a corner, I think, this weekend a little bit as far as getting a lot of momentum going. I would think Mississippi State has more just because they beat the defending national champs.
Yeah.
So we'll see. They might have a shot at shooting back up the power rankings, because I'm sure Starkville wants them to hunt for an SEC title, whenever there is baseball happening.
And when I watched that series, great crowds in Starkville for a program that's been down a couple of years, so that was good to see. Number 9, and I think hard to know what to do with this team. South Carolina lost the series at Ole Miss. Did get a game. Look, nobody was winning on the road this weekend, evidently. So it was not a lopsided series, outscored 19-13. I thought Carolina's bats would be better than they were. I don't think that Ole Miss is like an extreme hitter's ballpark, but certainly I've seen some balls get out of there. So I thought South Carolina would do a little bit more with the bats. What did you see from the Gamecocks this weekend?
Yeah, I think they take the cake for being the team me and you every week look at and go, well, I don't really know what to do. So, and that's because I looked at their hitting statistics, and they're towards the top of the SEC in walks and getting on base that way, and like on base percentage. They're towards the bottom in hitting itself. So like batting average, slugging percentage, things like that, which is a really weird combination to have. Yeah, very bizarre. But they did pretty good this weekend. I mean, they were able to, I guess, escape Ole Miss with a win on Sunday that they needed. I think that would have been kind of, what's the word, dreadful, I guess, so to speak, if they got swept. Yeah. But they were able to get out of there. The pitching just wasn't as good as it was during some of the non-conference series they had. Again, that's tribute to the opponents they played during non-conference play. But they were able to, I think, escape with a win. And I think it's hard, going on the road and trying to get a win your first SEC series. So we'll see how they play going forward. But I kind of just want to look for better hitting totals, like hitting the ball itself at the plate. If they can keep up, if they keep up the walk rate and the on base percentage, they'll shoot up the SEC standings like pretty easily. But I think just looking for more consistency, pitching, and actually hitting the ball for them going forward is what I'm trying to look for.
Yeah, I think they've got enough established bats that I think they'll figure it out. Now here's a team that surprised me. Kentucky just obliterating Georgia this week. And again, had the park advantage. I thought stylistically it was about as disparate a matchup as you will get in this league between a team that bunts and runs and steals and doesn't have a lot of like elite arms in terms of strikeouts, but keeps the ball on the ground, and a Georgia team that gets the ball in the air a lot. Ballpark and style and weather won this one going away. Kentucky now this morning, 16th in ELO, 4 in KPI, and 11th in Kenneth Massey. Now, that surprises me. I don't know that I'm buying into Kentucky as that level of team, but that's what the computers are spitting out at the moment. I believe you had the Cats this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Give us a rundown on what you liked.
Yeah, I tend to, Chris, you probably noticed, and everyone watching notices, I tend to focus on the few anchors in the lineup that kind of get everything going and rotating for teams. For Kentucky, for me, it's Emilian Petrie and Nick Lopez. Nick Lopez in particular has just had a really good year. 435 average still at this point in the season. A lot of 16 runs, slugging percentage over 700, on base percentage at 45.7. He's been very, very good this year. He's good in the field too. He's pretty decent in the field too. 91% fielding percentage. I think he's the leader on this team, the guy that gets it going and stuff. And the question we've had for Kentucky has been pitching, and they shut down a Georgia lineup that could hit the crap out of the balls, so to speak. And that was huge for them. I guess it also helped that it was in Lexington. I think maybe it would have been a different story if it was in Athens, but it's the schedule, luck of the draw, and they were able to get it done and whatnot. Again, this is another weird one. I don't know if Kentucky is going to be as high as 8 for the majority of the season, but due to how they won this weekend compared to the other teams and whatnot, I think that's how they shot up the board like this. And I'm trying to see. They just
we all slipped on Kentucky last year, and they kept doing it all season. So
right, we'll have to see. Another guy I want to shout out to for them, their left fielder Ryan Waldschmidt, 6 runs, very good on offense this weekend, and he hasn't necessarily been the standout, big time player for them. He has a good batting average, but his walk rate's pretty good as well. So he's a guy I don't think I've talked about as much, and he's starting to get some notoriety, especially from this series. So we'll just have to see with them. But I like Kentucky. I liked what Kentucky did this weekend. I think it was one of the more impressive performances. And who knows? Like you said, last year they were able to keep it going, and maybe we see that this year. But they kind of break out of the basement of our power rankings this week.
Yeah, and here's what's shocking: Kentucky slugged 750 for the weekend, 8 home runs. Just not the type of lineup that you would expect to do that. That might be an indictment of Georgia's pitching staff, but let's give credit where it's due. I love what Nick Mangione has done there, and I would say Kentucky was a team that I'm not going to say everybody was sleeping on, but certainly not a team that was ranked in the preseason. We'll see if the Cats can break the national rankings soon. I haven't checked the polls today. Well, I checked the top of them, but I didn't see the bottom. I doubt they'd be ranked, but we'll see. All right, this is now where it gets interesting. Alabama at 7, which doesn't feel fair after the start the Tide has gotten. And I think what it is, you've got 3 or 4 teams ahead of Alabama that have also been playing lights out. You've also got, as you've figured out by now, the defending national champion and the defending national runner-up, which get a little bit of grace by virtue of that, and also I think both those teams, and obviously we're talking about Florida and LSU here, are ranked in the with top 3 in everybody's preseason polls, I think. So there was that, or at least top 4 or 5. Long way to say that we're still giving some deference to what these teams were coming in, and that probably is not fair to Alabama. But look, if Alabama keeps playing like it did last weekend, the Crimson Tide will move up, and that'll be that.
Yeah, they were able, again, it's like you said, they had the advantage of being at home, and they were able to kind of take advantage of the little mistakes Tennessee had, beating them in a series 2-1. The first game wasn't pretty for them on offense. I think they scored in the first few innings, but from there on out, Tennessee shut them down. Was not the case the last 2 games on Saturday and Sunday. They were able to kind of keep their offense up, as well as just really not blow Tennessee out of the water, but match them pretty much in every sense of offense, from base running, hitting, getting on base, all that good stuff. And like you said, I think Alabama, they're kind of starting to make their face known towards the top here in the SEC if they keep this up. So we'll have to see. Maybe after this week and this upcoming weekend, they really kind of put a stamp on where they are in this conference.
Yeah, their JUCO third baseman was a really good addition. Had a big home run for them this weekend. Watch out for that team. I thought the pitching was going to be really good for them coming in. Didn't know about the lineup, but they're starting to really hit a little bit. Getting enough runs to take 2 or 3 out of Tennessee is a nice start. So the Tide have played exceptionally well after the coaching change, the one last year too, to be frank. And I continue to really like this team. Okay, number 6, we've got Florida, which is weird because Florida's the defending national runner-up, and oh, by the way, just took 2 or 3 from the hottest team in the country. I think both of us are still a little bit scared off by Florida's pitching performance coming into the weekend, giving up a lot of runners, and the lineup hadn't quite been what we wanted. So this isn't just you take a lot of things into consideration. You look at what we thought a team was coming back, and we also look at what a team was done and has done so far. Excuse me. So I guess you would kind of think with that we'd have had Florida a little bit higher than 6, but I think that tells you something about the baseball that the teams in front of the Gators are playing.
Yeah, and talking about Florida's pitching, it was not bad by any means this weekend, I don't think, in my opinion. I mean, Cade Fisher had a 10K start in the first win they got this weekend. They pretty much, and A&M, the story of them has been their pitching's been lights out, and that's why they've kind of stood at the top of the SEC for so long and has been, had been undefeated up until that point. But I think Florida kind of, at times just matched it, head for head, and they were able to get a lot of good play out of their bats. Tyler Shelnut, another good game. I believe it was the Friday game. Yeah, he had 3 RBIs in that win. They were the one loss they had. It was the middle Saturday game. They just couldn't really get a lot of offense going after the first few innings. But I think this is what Florida needed, because there was a lot of question marks marked on this team. I think a lot of people like us were putting them at the top of the SEC still, but it was like there's always that asterisk next to them because of their pitching. So I'll have to see. One of the big stories for me will be their pitching this week and this weekend to see if it can maintain the sort of competitive stability it had against A&M, because anyone can have a good weekend pitching the baseball. It's just a matter if they can do it over time, but we'll have to see. Cade Fisher kind of set the tone on it, and they were able to get a really good series win to start SEC play, which is what they needed.
Next up, we got Tennessee, and I feel like Tennessee's better than 5. The problem becomes where to put them, because you got 3 teams in front of them. They're playing really well, and also the defending national champion. Look, the Vols went on the road, lost a series to Alabama, but did outscore Alabama, 20-14 on the weekend. which indicates, Tennessee was right there when if you watch the series, it was. Did you make any interesting conclusions about the Vols based on what you saw this weekend?
Yeah, they weren't. It wasn't a like a bad first series to have at all. I don't think. I mean, they were competitive with Alabama all weekend. None of the losses they had, the 2 losses they had, were blowouts. It was all within 3 runs. These games. And they were put in late inning situations where they could have won the game if they did not make bad plate discipline decisions, which has been rare for them so far. There was a lot of guys last year on this team who their plate discipline came into question just because they were wanting to send the ball over the fence at Lindsey Nelson Stadium because of how short that ballpark is. And this year they got better at it. I think that monster from last year reared its ugly head again this series, but it's definitely a learning curve. I mean, I have a feeling playing at Alabama will be a hard series to play going forward this season for the remainder of it. But yeah, I think they still maintained, pretty good batting. I mean, Billy Amick has been the guy for them all year. He continued to have a good series. Pitching wise, it was pretty good. AJ Causey had a good start in their 11-3 win on Friday. Their bullpen was kind of hit or miss after that, but I still think the Vols are going to sit at the top of this SEC power ranking spiel, and they'll be there by the end of the year. It's not the first series that they had was not too worrying.
Yeah, ELO's got Tennessee 7, KPI 13, and Kenneth Massey, which goes by a lot of run differential. It's got them 4 nationally. No, look, I think Tennessee's beating up on Albany, which I don't think has won a game, is probably played into that a little bit in the latter one. But look, this is a team that still has got a lot of pop and a lot of pitching, and I think is going to end up probably higher than we've got them ranked right now. But we'll see. You lose a series, you usually drop a little bit. That's what happened here. Okay, LSU has slid to 4. I think I would have flipped LSU and Tennessee here, but that's not how we voted as a staff. So, I think this is a staff that's just missing. A hitting bunch that's missing a Dylan Cruz and a Trey Morgan. Got a lot of good young hitters. Luke Holman is the SEC's leader in ERA with .63, but lost 2 of 3 on the road. Almost lost 3 of 3. Christian Little blew up in one of those games. That really hurt the old ERA. But what did you see out of the Tigers this weekend?
Yeah, you were mentioning it last week, not having Dylan Cruz, and a lot of the big names they had last year from that championship team kind of can come back to hurt them. And they don't have, if you look at the lineup, like a picture of all their names, it's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, they have guys who can hit the ball really well. Tommy White, Hayden Travinski, Brady Neal, Michael Braswell, the transfer from South Carolina, Bingham, who I said had a good weekend coming in from Arizona. Jared Jones, too. He's had a very good year, and I feel like he doesn't get enough credit for it if you're not an LSU fan. But I think, it's, again, we all know, if you're a college baseball fan, normally how hard it is to play in Starkville. I mean, that's when that place gets rocking. You really have to earn it win-wise. Yeah. I just think the hitting concerns, they weren't really concerns for us. They were just little like, I don't know if their hitting's the same.
Well, look, the bar was set so high last year. I think that's what we're still, and there was a thought that, okay, LSU's bringing all these guys that sat the bench last year that would have been starting anywhere else because of the depth. And those guys just haven't quite popped yet on the level with some of the guys in the rest of the league. I think that's really the best way to say it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not like they got kind of hosed with a hard series to start the year, if you have something like that happening. So it's a lot like Tennessee's case. I mean, I think they normally can get, they can hit the ball better. Let's see how they play with a series in Alex Box and see how that goes for them. But I think I'm not too worried about them. Their hitting just was not to the level to match Mississippi State this weekend, and the Bulldogs took advantage of it.
Number 3, Texas A&M, which had been unbeaten, lost 2 of 3 to Florida. But look, that was a competitive series. Let me pull up the composite score here as we're doing this. I'll tell you who had a great series for them was Jackson Appel, who I think was a leading on base guy over the weekend. Yeah, in fact, he had a 692 on base and a slugging over 1,000. Both those not easy to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's some pretty crazy video numbers there from Jackson Appel. Of course, Braden Montgomery hit a couple more home runs. Ryan Prager finally got hit. He had just been invincible so far. Look, A&M scores 18 runs, gives up 18. So the series was a wash. Somebody had to win. That went to Florida. I could even argue the Aggies at 2. We were close on that, but that's where we settled this week.
Yeah, I mean they're still one of the best teams. They still belong in this top 3. Or like you said, arguably top 2. The team we have at 2, not giving it away, but they just were lights out this weekend, and that kind of helped them get this spot. But A&M again, I think the pitching once again was great. Prager did get hit a little bit, but because of that, I think Florida was able just to match that kind of energy with their pitching staff, and it just kept the games squared right where the Gators wanted it, and they were just able to kind of match A&M bat for bat, pitch for pitch, all the way through the end. This team, they continue just to, be an offensive powerhouse. Montgomery still leads the league in RBIs. Lavallette's up there in the top 10 as well in RBIs. They'll be good again. Again, that's a hard series to have.
That's a difficult ballpark too.
It's a trip for them. I mean, that's College Station all the way down to Gainesville. I mean, that's like a bit of a stretch to go for your first series, and it is a difficult park, to play in and whatnot. So I think the A&Ms, LSUs, and Tennessees kind of just got the short end of the stick when it came to their first SEC series, and they paid the price for it by having teams that just match them, with their production. And I'm not too worried about A&M. We'll just have to see how they do in a home series coming up shortly.
Yeah, a couple things with the pitching falter this week, and they walked or hit 15 batters, which has been uncharacteristic. Gave up 31 hits, which is uncharacteristic, but not hard to do when you're playing Florida in that ballpark. But the problem was 8 doubles, 8 home runs, and that was an SEC high in both categories, although the home runs tied with with Missouri and Georgia. So, yeah, that just not the weekend A&M had been accustomed to having, but also that's not the toughest schedule the Aggies had played either. And so, yeah, that can happen to you playing in Florida. All right, number 2, Vanderbilt moved way up. And by the way, D1 baseball had Vanderbilt number 3 nationally this week. I think Oregon State was 2 maybe, and Arkansas, which as you figured out by now is our number 1 team. But Vanderbilt hit the daylights out of the ball this weekend. Not a lot of home runs, but we've said this is a team that is going to just really press you, hit a lot of doubles. Vanderbilt leads the league with 38 doubles, kind of middle of the pack in home runs. Just a team that has really, really been, I don't know. Alan Espall had 615 for the weekend. That's crazy good. Was SEC Player of the Week. He's their catcher. In fact, I got the doubles number wrong. They've hit 54, which is actually second behind Tennessee, but that's kind of what they are. Lead the league with 8 triples. Again, middle of the pack in home runs. 40-32 on base as a team. Also beat Indiana in the midweek. This is a team that the starting pitching was good this weekend, other than Devin Futrell, who kind of clustered his runners and gave up some runs there. But Bryce Cunningham was really good again. Carter Holton was amazing on Friday. Again, I thought Auburn was a really quality opponent. They take a lot of pitches. They foul pitches off. They walk a lot. That can tax a pitching staff. But Vanderbilt's got some pitching depth, and its hitting really showed up. I continue to like this team. I think it's a complete team. Still got some questions. The bullpen's a little bit of a question, and they're not going to hit home runs with the top-tier teams. And that could be a thing that if Vanderbilt tumbles down the power rankings later, we're giving those as reasons why. But I think as of today, they've won 13 in a row, beat Indiana, which was ranked in D1 earlier in the year. So I had a good week beating 2 teams that had been ranked in the top 25 at some point this season. I thought the Commodores looked great this weekend, which brings us to number 1 Arkansas. You know how to not get beaten baseball, Alfred? It's not to give up any runs. And Arkansas darn near did that this weekend. Gave up 1 run on a home run, 8 hits. I get it's Missouri. Struck out 37 guys, walked 10, gave up 2 doubles. I mean, batting average against .96. If you want to pick nits here, hit 3 guys and walked 10. Let's fire the pitching coach. He's obviously screwing it up. No, seriously, I don't know. I mean, it was the easiest opponent in the league. It was at home. But Arkansas with that top-end pitching, I'm always when in doubt, I'm going to go with top-end pitching as a tiebreaker, and boy, these guys have got it.
God, it's like cartoon jaw drop to the floor watching them pitch. I mean, they were lights out the entire weekend. Hagen-Smith Friday, 2-hit baseball, 10 strikeouts. Tigert and McIntyre combined for 12 strikeouts in the Saturday shutout. Mason Molina, I don't know if he might have been the one to give up the home run, but it was 1-hit baseball, 10 strikeouts for him. So that home run might have been the 1 hit, and that's it. Like you said, it's Missouri, but at the same time, I mean, if they pitch the way they did against any of these other SEC teams, they're probably going to come out on top and win. Lead the league in ERA, 2.35. Opposing batting average on the year, they lead that, 183, which is nuts to have at this point in the season. They've struck out the most batters, 255. LSU's knocking right on the door for that in second. They've picked off a lot of runners, too. They're pretty good on defense, second in the SEC in that, second in the SEC with 5 runners picked off, 10 saves as well this year. They're putting pitching together that's able to put them in national title contention pretty much solely at this point compared to every other team in the country. And honestly, if the lineup just scores a few runs, they'll be able to get wins. I think it's that they have a formula for it. Maybe it comes back to they might lose a few games just because of very uncharacteristic pitching nights. But for the most part, it's going to be hard seeing this team or saying that this team would lose a series in SEC play this year by the way they're pitching.
Yeah, they'll lose to somebody at some point because everybody always loses a series or two, but it's going to have to be somebody that can match their pitching. By the way, they hit 8 home runs, I think, this week too. So the one thing that they've had trouble doing, granted it was Missouri, but they did it. So anyway, all right, that wraps up power rankings this week. We'll continue to stay on top of it. I think clarity is going to be maybe a little easier to come by now that we're in conference play and 95% of these series, which it seems like it's been out of – well, that's not fair. You've had some teams that have played in Texas and in California and some expanded series in a classic format. But for the most part, 3 of the 4 non-conference weekends were SEC teams against somebody that they overmatched, and more often than not, those teams overmatched. The SEC teams overmatched the out-of-conference teams.
Right.
By a lot, and I just don't think that's always a great indication of what you're going to get in the SEC, but the quality of opposition is a lot better. So, with that said, if you want to explain the shuffling in our power rankings a little bit this week, it's because you finally got some good on good, and we started making some judgments in favor of that. All right, that'll do it for our power rankings this week. For Alfred Ezman, I'm Chris Lee. This is Southeastern 14 presented by BetOnline.